This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Trump derangement syndrome, alive and well. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. You know, I was clicking around looking for latest stories on Trump derangement syndrome, also called TDS. And it's just funny what's out there. Congressman Warren Davidson, back in May of 2025, introduced an actual piece of legislation, the Trump Derangement Syndrome Research Act of 2025. This is a congressman from Ohio. This bill, I'm reading from the website now, this bill would direct the National Institutes of Health, NIH, to study the psychological and social roots of what is known as Trump derangement syndrome, a phenomenon marked by extreme negative reactions to President Donald J. Trump. He was joined, Congressman Warren Davidson, that is, was joined by the original co-sponsor, Congressman Barry Moore, Republican of Alabama. Okay, this is hilarious, right? Hilarious on one aspect, but really much needed. You could actually make a case that TDS should be included in the official book of psychiatric diagnoses. Just look at what Democrats are doing. Just look at what they did during his first administration. Look at what they continue to do. Before I get into more of this, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, and I know you do, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network. That is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. They have all kinds of great video and audio productions there, putting into perspective all the Trump derangement syndrome sufferers out there. Where are they coming from? Well, how about looking to the Bible for that? So you can get Bold and Blunt there at RLN, Real Life Network. You may also get Bold and Blunt at WashingtonTimes.com, where if you haven't signed up for my 3 times a week newsletter, please do. Just go to the webpage and find the newsletter section. It's linked at the bottom of the page. Click on it and find the best of Cheryl Chumley. You'll get delivered right to your email box, my commentaries, as well as my video versions of Bold and Blunt and my audio versions of Bold and Blunt. You don't have to do anything, just sit at your desk, eat your lunch, and watch or listen or read all my Bold and Blunt stuff. You may also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. Let's read this quote from Congressman Davidson, Republican, Ohio, the one who introduced Trump Derangement Syndrome Research Act of 2025. TDS, he says, has divided families, the country, and led to nationwide violence, including 2 assassination attempts. I think there have been now 3, right, since 2025, including 2 or 3 or however many more assassination attempts on President Trump. The TDS Research Act would require the NIH to study this toxic state of mind so we can understand the root cause and identify solutions. I can give you the root cause, being a Democrat, right? Just sweep up all the Democrats, all the declared Democrat voters in America, stuff them in a room, stuff them in a warehouse somewhere, and sit them down and start questioning them about their views of Trump. If they freak out, like we've seen on many videos how they do, for instance, right after Trump was announced the winner The second time around here, we saw those videos of people just getting down on their knees and just screaming in the streets and making videos of themselves in their cars while they hold the phone out and they just scream. They just scream. So, that would be called a clue, right? A clue that this poor Democrat voter suffers from TDS. So I would start there. And identify the solutions. Don't be a Democrat. It just seems to be par for the course, right? If you're a Democrat, if you vote Democrat, if you're affiliated in any way with the Democrat Party, sooner or later you're going to be infected with TDS. It's like Anthony Fauci was saying, he is science, and if one face mask is good, 10 face masks are even better. Well, if staying away from one Democrat is good, staying away from all the Democrats even better. All right, back to this quote. Instead of funding, Congressman Davidson says, instead of funding ludicrous studies such as giving meth to cats or teaching monkeys to gamble for their drinking water. That must have been an interesting study, right? The NIH should use that funding to research issues that are relevant to the real world. All right, now Congressman Moore weighed in as well with his own comment. Trump derangement syndrome has become an epidemic on the left. Some individuals, he said, who suffer from Trump derangement syndrome have participated in nationwide political and social unrest, even trying to assassinate President Trump twice. Well, the count is higher now, 3 times or more. Congressman Davidson's common sense bill will use already appropriated funds on an NIH study that can make a difference. Well, it's hilarious, right? But then again, it's not. And so scroll around online for Trump derangement syndrome, and sooner or later you will find this link from a therapy group of DC, therapygroupdc.com, which I kid you not, I thought it was a joke at first, but I don't think it is. I think this is real. It was penned by a PhD, Brad Brenner. And the title of this, The Psychology of Trump Derangement Syndrome. So like you're probably thinking right now, oh, this is a joke, right? Well, it reads like a joke when it first opens. And let me just read from it. Welcome. In this post, Brad Brenner writes, we attempt to unpack the intense emotions swirling around Trump derangement syndrome. Whatever you're feeling about the current political moment, such as anger, anxiety, exhaustion, or grief, those reactions make sense. The issues driving them are real. You'll learn what drives the anger, anxiety, and fixation many people feel and how those reactions ripple through mental health and relationships. I kid you not, I thought this was a joke. I thought this was satire. I thought this was headed to Saturday Night Live's decision desk to determine whether they could make a skit out of it. But no. The next section is what you'll learn. So apparently what you'll learn by reading this post, still thinking it's a joke. And then it goes down, it talks about trace how the derangement syndrome label has been slung across party lines, la-di-da. Identify the deeper psychological forces beneath all this intense political stress, yada, yada. Recognize the warning signs that politics is hurting your mental health and relationships. And then finally, what you'll learn is apply evidence-based tactics and therapies provided by a mental health professional to stay grounded. Whomever's in office, I think is the grammatically way to say it. But seriously, if thinking this is a joke, what you'll learn, right? They give you the 4 bullet points, what you're going to learn. What is Trump derangement syndrome really is the next question that pops. And above, the headlines above this beautiful picture of Capitol Hill, the congressional building, the Capitol in the background, and people milling about on this beautiful, what appears to be autumn wet day. And then it goes on. The derangement syndrome label shuts down the very conversations we need to be having about the issues underneath. Okay, so now I'm starting to think, is this real? This can't be real, right? So I'm scrolling ahead. I'm scrolling ahead. How the label works in practice, and then he's got Brad Brenner's has 3 bullet points: triggers intense emotional reactions, anxiety, anger, blah blah blah. While those branded deranged may feel stigmatized and therefore withdraw or fire back, which fuels a cycle of rising stress and distance for everyone involved. How the label works in practice, bullet point 2, it puts identity on the line. Over the past few decades, political affiliation has fused more tightly with personal identity, and now how the label works in practice. Bullet point 3, acts as a weaponized dismissal, branding someone, quote, deranged, end quote, shifts the conversation from policy to sanity, shutting down dialogue instead of engaging in it. Well, what do you do if someone really is deranged? What do you do if they're like, laying down in the street like a 2-year-old, throwing a tantrum, just screaming senselessly? And the reason we know this is because these insane people take videos of themselves doing it and post it as if this is a sensible reaction to President Donald Trump winning the election. How do you not dismiss that as insane? So now I'm reading and I'm thinking, okay, this guy's nuts. This guy may have a PhD, but he is one of the overeducated masses. And then he goes on and he gives a brief history of the derangement syndrome label. And he starts with 2003. There was the Bush derangement syndrome, 2008, Obama, blah, blah, 2016, Clinton, blah, blah, and then 27 to present, leading to present day, 2026, TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. And he also has who popularized it, supporters in the media and politics, and the target of the insult is the critics of President Donald Trump. No. Trump supporters can take criticism of President Donald Trump. As a columnist at the Washington Times, I often write about my criticisms of President Donald Trump. But you're not going to see me take those criticisms and run out into the crowded streets of Washington, D.C., lay down, flail around, hit record on my smartphone, and then just start screaming. You're not going to see me dye my hair blue, right? And go gain 100 pounds and wear the tightest clothes that expose my belly and show off my 16 piercings on my belly button and my tattoos on my back, and like I said, with the dyed hair and all that, and the ultra red lipstick that goes outside the boundaries of my lips, lay down and start doing that, right? Wearing some fuzzy cat maybe outfit. I don't know. Be one of those furries and carry a placard that says "Down with Trump." There's a big difference. There's really a lot of gray area here, and I think this is where the TDS infected people miss the mark, right? You can not support President Donald Trump. You can criticize Donald Trump, and then way over here, if you could see me, I'm moving my hand across my desk to the right. I'm keeping my left hand fixed, and I'm moving my right hand way across my desk. And as far as I can stretch my arm out, this is the part that I just want to note. This is the part where you go off the deep end and you turn into a screaming nut job, a banshee, right? Who thinks that they're contributing to the political world and exercising their First Amendment freedom by dyeing their hair pink and blue and screaming on the street corners. So see, in between my left hand, which is still fixed, and my right hand, which is stretched out as far to the right as it could go, that's called the gray area. That's called the gray area, where you can criticize President Trump and you can look at his policies and you can have persuasive discussions and try and debate the finer points of the pros and cons of what this administration is doing, and you can make your case. And that's where you can vote, right? You can actually go to the ballot boxes and vote for those who perhaps would represent the other side of President Donald Trump's policies. So you can do all this. You can take you can take all the gray area and you can do all kinds of things that don't require you to head into TDS territory. But this therapy group of DC, it's not over yet. I'm only a quarter of the way down the page, people, okay? Then he goes into exploring the psychological roots, and I'm starting to get the idea, like, this is a well thought out treatise on how to combat through the psychological world Trump derangement syndrome. Like, this person is really serious. And this is where it hits me that this is not satire. This is not fodder for Saturday Night Live. This is real. There's a box when you're about halfway down the page that says political stress is real and we can help. And it's got a link. Find your therapist. With this little sentence, our therapists help you untangle political anxiety, demoralization, and distress from everything else that's going on. This is real. This is real. There was really a PhD who tackled the topic of Trump derangement syndrome, broke it down, and then, of course, put some handy-dandy links so you can click on them, find a therapist who will pat you on the head and coddle you and tell you that it's not your fault, that Trump is the cause of all your problems, that you're not paying your bills, and you're not realizing your dreams of becoming the next Marvel Avenger character because President Donald Trump won and he's in the White House. It's real. It's real. And my guest today, he has a book out, and it's talking about all the great things that President Trump has been doing in his time in the White House. So I just want to put this out here as a sort of caveat, as sort of a disclaimer, that if you are on the hinge on the side of tipping point toward Trump derangement syndrome, you may not want to hear from my guest today, because he's going to talk about good stuff that President Donald Trump has done. But he also was the target of the Trump derangement syndrome crowd himself during a recent book signing down there in old conservative land, Tennessee, right? Shocker, shocker. Todd Starnes, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
Cheryl, I promise to be bold and blunt.
You always are, Todd. That's why you are a favored guest. And as columnist, commentator, writer, radio host, now you add to your list your newest book, The Golden Age, How Trump Saved America. I understand, because I'm on your mailing list, so I receive your newsletter. You had a protest movement take over one of your book signings on this. What happened?
Cheryl, this was insane. This is my 9th book, and I've never had something like this happen. We were at the Barnes & Noble in Memphis, Tennessee, which is my hometown, which you would expect would be, friendly ground. And Senator Marsha Blackburn and Congressman David Kostoff were with me. We're doing the book event, and all of a sudden there's this massive mob of these you've seen them in other places, but they were morbidly obese, woke women, and they're just spewing all sorts of profanities and screaming at people and causing mayhem. And the great irony here, Cheryl, is I actually have a chapter in the book called, and it's called Todd's Gals of Girth. That's what I call this group, the GOGs. And in the book, it's a parody chapter where I offer myself up as a life coach to help the gals of girth find spouses so they can be fulfilled in their lives. But,
so you had a real life opportunity there.
Satire becomes reality.
So how did you how long did they stay? Did they completely disrupt your book signing? What happened?
Yeah, so they were eventually, I'm not sure what happened, but they were there for about 10 minutes before I think security was able to get them out of the Barnes and Noble. And
Wow.
we were back in the periodical section. So I'm just shocked they were able to, to gain access and breach the store that far. Apparently, there were also protesters outside that were picketing the Barnes and Noble because I was there. And I think they were also upset at Senator Marsha Blackburn, for being a Trump supporter as well.
So don't these people realize that when they do this is actually the best PR you could have as an author for your book, right?
It really is. I think my agent was like, "It's too bad they didn't punch you or something like that." Like, okay, let's
Jeez. All right. Let,
careful now.
let, let's talk about this Trump derangement syndrome because, as you write in your new book, The Golden Age How Trump Saved America, there are way too many Americans out there who would disagree. What's going on?
Yeah, it's really crazy, and I think at the end of the day, the anger is based really on the media coverage, and that's really why I wrote the Golden Age. I noticed that a lot of conservatives were starting to buy into this idea that this has been a failed term in office for the president. Not much has gotten done. So I just went back and looked at the promises he made on the campaign trail, and said, okay, did he accomplish these agenda items? And I discovered, sure enough, the president has succeeded on just about all of his campaign promises, not all, but just about all. And if the presidency were to end today, he could be very happy and satisfied that most of his agenda was accomplished. And that really was why I wanted to write the Golden Age, was to celebrate those accomplishments, but also to remind people that, you know what, we've got a role to play in continuing this after he does leave office.
So I know titles have to be catchy and attention grabbing, but explain why it's not hyperbole to say that Trump saved America.
Yeah, look. This is not hyperbole. I really believe that our country was heading to a very dark and dangerous place, but Biden had already gotten us there. We were just waiting to be shoved off the cliff into the socialist abyss. And Donald Trump stopped that from happening, and he's reversing a lot of very, very dangerous policies that have been set in place by the Democrats and the do nothing Republicans in Congress. And I just, go back to, if you go back to the first term in office, if Hillary Clinton would have been elected, we would have had a super majority of liberals on the highest court in the land. No doubt those numbers would have been added to, and you would have had a Democrat Congress that would have just obliterated the Constitution. So I don't believe it is hyperbole to say this president saved the country. Now, the thing about saving somebody is we can get ourselves right back into trouble again. So the question is, are we going to defend the president's policies and what he's done to make this country great?
I like how you make that point because, of course, it's obvious Trump can't be in the White House forever. And sooner or later, we are going to have Democrats leading in the political power bases once again. So what do Americans need to do to ensure that we don't get this, leftist lunacy in charge?
Well, one of the most important things we have to do is actually one of the president's unfinished agenda items, and that is to abolish the Department of Education. I think when you look at where all of the radical change has come from, that has happened in the country, from gender ideology to the critical race theory to the rise of socialism. I think all of that can actually be traced back to taxpayer-funded classrooms. That's where I think this is the engine driving this radical change in the country. And it's so vitally important that we get control of our local schools back to the local communities. And if we don't do that, we do risk losing the republic. I think it really is that serious of an issue. So I truly hope the president does follow through on his promise to abolish the Department of Education. And if we're able to do that, I do believe we've got a fighting chance.
You know, you and I have been covering politics and culture and the intersection of faith with that for, excuse me, a very long time. And I know that you're aware that there have been several promises made by Republican presidents over the years, the latest of whom, of course, is Trump, about abolishing the Department of Education. Why isn't it happening? Why is it taking so long?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the teachers unions are incredibly powerful and very well funded, and I don't think that we've got the Republican support on Capitol Hill that we need to make that happen and to follow through with that. So it is going to be it's going to be a long slog. I do think that that processes have been put in place. For example, threats to defund schools that still advance the transgender ideology, letting boys play on girls' sports teams. But I think we have to get away from the threat of defunding to actually defunding now, and to really hit that message home.
That's a great point, and 100% agree. Let's talk about the faith intersection now, the faith angle, because I'm pretty certain that you see this as crucial to America's long-term liberties. What role do churches play?
Well, I think this is the most important thing of all, Cheryl. I truly believe that our nation was founded on the teachings of the Christian faith. And when you take those teachings out of our founding documents and out of the way we conduct our affairs, then you get chaos in the culture. And John Adams wrote about this and this is what he meant when he said our Constitution is wholly inadequate for anyone other than a moral and a religious people. And I took people through the book and did a lot of research on some of the writings of our founding fathers, where they talked about these issues in very frank terms. And it was very clear to me that the Christian faith is really the foundation for who we are as a people. And unfortunately, we have watched over, I would say, the past decade at least, so many of our churches disengage from the culture fight. And that has been problematic. For example, in Memphis, Tennessee, while evangelical churches have disengaged, the progressive churches and the black churches have just jumped into the deep end of the pool. And there was a disturbing incident a couple of weeks ago where you had a black megachurch pastor tell 1,000 people at a political rally that Jesus was a socialist, therefore you should be a socialist. And the audience cheered. So this is what we have to fight against. And my book really is a message for Christians to stand up and be counted in the fight to save the country.
How do you answer that, Todd, when they say Jesus was a socialist, so you should be as well?
I usually tell people they're morons, but that's not very Christ-like. But when you look at the teachings of the Bible, let's just say I'm just going to take something obscure here. Let's talk about hard work. The Bible is filled with stories about people who were espousing this idea that if you want food, you got to go out there and you got to work for your food. There's no such thing as being lazy. And I think the good, solid American work ethic really came from the scriptures, and we've lost that in the country. But beyond that, I would say that if we do not get back to the teachings of Christ and really teach, and this is not about proselytizing. These are about these common values that we share from the Holy Bible. If we don't start infusing that into our education, and God bless the state of Texas for doing that, but if we don't do that nationwide, we're going to have big problems in this country.
So how would a good Christian fight the development of the Islamic centers and the growth of Islam, in America?
Yeah, this is a disturbing situation because you're watching a lot a lot of evangelical Christians partnering alongside the Islamists. And my theory is this: that Islam is not a religion. It is a political ideology where you have to swear allegiance to Sharia law. You have to comply with Sharia law. That is completely incompatible with the United States Constitution. And we're seeing this play out in places like Dearborn, Michigan, for example, and believe it or not, in the state of Texas, where the citizens are really frustrated because their elected leaders are doing nothing. And as a result, you're watching a literal takeover of communities by the Islamists. This is a holy war, and I know there are many that have written books about this. Dr. Michael Youssef is one of them, one of my favorite authors, and they warn that this is a clear and present danger to the republic. It is going to be a problem moving forward, only if nothing else because of the population explosion. The Baptists aren't having as many babies as the Muslims are, and that's just a reality.
So do you, just real quick before we get back to your book to finish up, do you have any recommendations there? Because it is a growing problem, and too many Americans seem reluctant to get involved in this fight.
Well, they do, and they look at this and they frame it as a religious liberty issue.
Yes.
I do not. Again, I don't believe it is religious liberty. I think one of the ways that Congress can step in is by outlawing Sharia, the practice of Sharia law. I think they can do that. You're also seeing the governor of Texas, over the weekend, the governor announcing that he's reviewing these Islamic washing stations that have been set up at the airports in Dallas, Fort Worth, and in Houston. So again, one of the things that concerns me is, they keep telling us, oh, you can't talk about Christianity in public schools, and they're making all of these accommodations for Islam. We've got to put a stop to that, and that is something that legislatures can do.
It's very common sense, the recommendations you just mentioned. So the Golden Age, How Trump Saved America. What will readers learn from this? Just to wrap up, anything you want to say about your book, Todd?
Well, it's a fun read. There's a lot of humor in the book, and for example, we cover the transgender issue with a funny little parody called Jimmy Lee Ledbetter's Dating a Rhubarb, about an individual who identifies as a literal vegetable. So we try to enjoy the absurdities of this weird time that we're living in, but also it is a celebration of who we are as an American people, and also a reminder that the Golden Age really is not about lower gas prices and affordability. It's about an aspiration, and this idea that we really are meant to be a shining city on a hill. And I think ultimately, for me, that's what the Golden Age is all about.
I like that, Todd. It's not about padding your 401k. It's about the spirit of America. What better time to get this book than the 250th? Great read. Todd Starnes, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt, and thanks for all the work you do.
Cheryl, it's always fun. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's another Bold and Blunt. Remember, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at Edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.